The first time I looked down at the atlas, I only meant to check whether the next turn was the county road or the farm access road, because out there the signs aren't really signs so much as suggestions. My dome light was off. The page was catching just enough glow from the dash, and I had one finger holding the fold open when I saw white light move across the paper. Not from in front of me. From behind. I remember sitting up a little straighter and checking the mirror twice because I hadn't seen another car in at least an hour, probably more. Eastern Oregon at night gets so dark it stops feeling like empty land and starts feeling like the road is the only thing left in the world. No streetlights, no houses, no lit windows anywhere. Just gravel, sagebrush, black hills, and my headlights cutting this narrow path through it. The headlights behind me stayed the exact same distance back. That was the part that started to bother me. I need to explain something first, because if you're the kind of person who hates driving alone at night, this is going to sound like I made a stupid decision way before any of this started. I wasn't lost. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't doing anything that felt reckless at the time. I actually like solo drives, I always have. I think some people need background noise all the time, and I'm kind of the opposite. If I've been working all week and my phone's been blowing up and people keep asking me for things, getting in the car by myself for a long stretch feels like my brain finally unclenches. I also don't fully trust GPS once the roads get remote. That's probably the most dad thing about me, even though I'm not a dad. I keep a paper road atlas in my car, always. It's bent up and soft at the corners and half the pages are dog-eared. People make fun of that until their map app decides a seasonal cattle road is a normal route and drops them in the middle of nowhere. So I keep the atlas on the passenger seat, usually open to whatever county I'm cutting through, and if I have to double-check something, I do it the old way. That night I was taking a back road route on purpose. I'd left later than I meant to, and I didn't feel like dealing with highway traffic, trucks kicking spray, people riding my bumper, all that. The scenic route sounded better. It was dry out, not cold enough for ice, and I had a full tank. The road was rough in spots, but nothing serious. Just that washboard vibration through the wheel every now and then, and the steady hiss of gravel under the tires. I'd cracked the window a little because the car still held heat weird from the afternoon, and every so often I'd get a breath of cold air and that dusty sage smell that only seems to exist out there. I was fine. I had a gas station coffee in the cup holder that had gone from hot to bitter to basically useless. I had sunflower seed shells in the little side pocket of the door. I had an old playlist on low, mostly songs I wasn't really listening to. The atlas was open to the right page. Everything about it felt under control. Then I saw those headlights. At first I figured exactly what any normal person would figure. They must have turned onto the road from somewhere I hadn't noticed. A ranch entrance, a service road, something like that. There are all these cutoffs out there that don't look like roads until you're right on top of them, so I told myself, okay, that's fine, another car exists. Not illegal, but a minute went by. Then another. They stayed directly behind me, not close enough to flash me, not far enough to forget about. Just locked there. Same distance, same speed. When the road curved, they curved. When I hit a rough patch and instinctively eased off the gas a little, they eased off too. It was so exact that I started noticing it in my shoulders before I consciously admitted I was paying attention. I was holding the wheel tighter. My jaw was set. I looked at the speedometer and realized I was going under what I'd been doing. Not by much, just enough to see whether they'd pass. They didn't. I slowed a little more. Still nothing. The road was wide enough in that stretch that if someone wanted by, they could have taken it. Instead, the headlights kept that same position like they were tied to the back of my car. I remember saying out loud just to hear a human voice, "Okay, so pass me then." They didn't. That's when I did the thing that in hindsight probably told them I was aware of them. I sped up hard, not because I wanted to race, just because I wanted a reaction. The road wasn't great for it, which is why what happened next got under my skin so fast. The second I hit the gas, they did too. No hesitation, no gradual acceleration. They closed the gap much faster than seemed smart on that kind of road, like they either knew it better than I did or they didn't care what hitting a rut at that speed might do. My coffee sloshed against the lid. The Atlas slid a little farther off the seat. I felt that cold sensation in my hands that happens before you even admit to yourself that something's wrong. I checked my phone. No signal, not one bar. Just that empty little indicator like the phone itself had given up on the area. I told myself maybe they were impatient and weird. Maybe they were drunk. Maybe they thought I was driving too slow and were being an idiot about it. That was still easier to believe than anything else, so I kept trying to make it fit. A few minutes later, the road straightened enough that I moved slightly right, tires kicking up a little loose gravel, to let them pass. I even took my foot off the gas again. It was a clear invitation. If you want around me, go around me. Instead, the headlights came closer. Then they pulled up beside me, not fast, not angry. Just this slow, deliberate creep until there was another vehicle pacing mine in the dark, right off my left side, close enough that I could hear the different pitch of their engine under mine. I didn't look over at first. I stayed facing forward because it felt safer somehow, which I know doesn't make sense. But if you've ever had a moment where you know looking at something is going to make it real, it's like that. The road ahead was pale in my headlights, and the shoulder on my right dropped off into loose gravel and brush. The car beside me was just there in my peripheral vision, a shape made out of dull paint and reflected light. The weirdest thing, even now, is that they didn't rev the engine or honk or gesture. If somebody pulls alongside you on an empty road at night, your brain wants a reason. Road rage, maybe. Somebody trying to tell you your brake light is out. Somebody lost. Some kind of normal social script. But there was nothing. Just a car keeping perfect pace with mine in the middle of nowhere. I finally looked. I wish I hadn't, but I did. The driver was a man, or at least I think it was a man. Mid-build, ball cap maybe, face mostly shadowed. What I saw clearly was that he wasn't looking at me. He wasn't even looking at the road the way people do when they're driving on rough gravel at night. He was staring straight ahead with this flat, fixed focus, and one of his hands was resting on something long laid across his lap. I don't know what it was. A pry bar, a long flashlight, a piece of pipe, a rifle. I honestly don't know, and that's part of why it still bothers me. It was long enough that it reached from near the steering wheel across toward the passenger side, and the way he held it wasn't casual. It wasn't like something happened to be there, it was placed there. My mouth went dry so fast I had to swallow twice. And then his car drifted toward mine. Not a swerve, not like he lost control. It was a slow nudge, gentle enough that if I overreacted on that shoulder, I could have put myself off the road. Gravel spat against the underside of my car. I jerked the wheel right, felt the tires catch at the edge where the packed road turned loose, and for 1 second I had that horrible floating feeling like the car was deciding whether it belonged to me anymore. I remember making a sound, not a scream exactly, more like the kind of noise you make when something heavy slips in your hands. Then instinct took over. I slammed the accelerator and aimed for the only thing ahead that looked different from more road. It wasn't even a proper turn, just this dark break in the brush off to the right, barely wider than a driveway. If the moon had been brighter, I might have seen it sooner. If my headlights had hit it a second later, I would have missed it. I cut the wheel hard and took it. The whole car bucked. Dust exploded up around me. Gravel hammered the wheel wells. The Atlas flew off the seat and hit the floor. I heard my own tires throwing stones into the brush, and for a second I was sure I was going to bottom out or hit a ditch or roll the whole car into some hidden wash. But the path held. I killed my headlights. I don't know if that was smart. It just happened. 1 second the road was there, the next it wasn't, and I was driving by memory and the faintest gray shape of the track in front of me while dust drifted around the hood. My heart was hitting so hard it felt mechanical, like something wrong with the car rather than me. I could taste old coffee and adrenaline in the back of my throat. I kept going. The track narrowed almost immediately. Sage slapped against both sides of the car with this dry scraping sound. I couldn't go fast without risking wrecking, but I couldn't make myself stop either. So I drove in the dark for what felt like a long time and was probably less than a minute, hands locked on the wheel, shoulders up to my ears, trying to keep the tires inside the 2 paler strips of dirt. I kept waiting to see headlights flood the rear window. Nothing. I waited longer. Still nothing. Then the fear changed shape. At first it had been sharp and simple. Get away from the car beside you. Once I was off that road, a different thought hit me. What if this track dead-ended? What if I'd just traded one bad situation for a worse one? What if he knew these roads better than I did and was already circling around to where this came out? I turned the headlights back on for half a second, just enough to see that I was on some kind of dirt service road or ranch access trail, rutted but passable, fence line off to one side, brush and low trees to the other. Then I turned them off again and kept moving. No signal on my phone, still nothing. I don't know how many turns I took after that. The Atlas was on the floor now, and I wasn't going to stop long enough to pick it up. I just followed whatever seemed like the more traveled path whenever the tracks split. My entire world had narrowed down to the sound of rocks under the tires, the dusty smell blowing in through the cracked window, and the mirror. I checked the mirror constantly, even though there was almost nothing to see. Black behind me. Black everywhere. Eventually I reached a gate. My stomach dropped so hard I almost laughed because of course there'd be a gate. Out there, every piece of land belongs to somebody, or feels like it does. I hit the brakes, jumped out with the engine still running, and the cold air felt shocking after the closed-in heat of the car. My legs were weirdly unsteady. The metal latch on the gate was gritty and stiff, and I fumbled it twice because my fingers wouldn't work right. I kept looking over my shoulder into the dark while I dragged it open just wide enough for the car. The silence out there was awful, not peaceful, not quiet in a nice way. It was the kind of silence that makes every tiny sound feel like proof of something. My engine idling, my own breathing, the tick of cooling metal somewhere under the hood. Far off, maybe a fence wire moving in the wind. Or maybe not. I got back in, drove through, stopped again, closed the gate behind me because I have enough ranch family in my extended life to know you don't leave gates open even when your brain is on fire, and kept going. A few miles later, the dirt road met pavement. I actually said thank you out loud when the tires hit it. It wasn't a highway. It was another small road, maybe county maintained, maybe not, but it had center lines, and that was enough to make me feel like I'd re-entered human reality. I turned my headlights back on fully and drove another few miles before I saw a road sign I could use. When I finally pulled over, it was at a wide spot near a cattle guard where I could see in every direction. My hands were shaking so badly the phone nearly slipped out of them. 1 bar, then 2. I called a friend first because I didn't even know exactly where I was to explain it to anybody official. I just needed someone to hear my voice and keep me talking while I figured it out. I remember hearing myself sound much calmer than I felt, which almost scared me more, like my body had gone so far past panic that it came out flat. After that, I called the county non-emergency line. I gave them the road I'd been on, the approximate area, what the car looked like as best as I could remember. Dark sedan, maybe gray, maybe blue, dusty enough that I couldn't tell. Driver wearing a cap, maybe. No plate because I never saw the front clearly and never got behind him again. Something long across his lap. I could hear how thin it all sounded while I was saying it. The dispatcher didn't dismiss me, which helped. She asked good questions. She told me where the nearest town was and suggested I drive there before stopping again. So I did. I found a 24-hour gas station with bright overhead lights and two bored guys inside arguing about jerky flavors, and I stayed parked under those lights for almost an hour. Every time a car turned in, my stomach dropped. Every dark sedan looked possible. Nobody bothered me. Nothing happened. The fluorescent lights buzzed. The coffee in there smelled burnt. A refrigerator motor kept clicking on and off near the back wall. Normal, ugly, wonderful little details. I bought a bottle of water I didn't need just so I could stand at the counter and hear the cashier talk about something ordinary. Weather, road work, doesn't matter. I just needed somebody to act like the world was still boring. I didn't take back roads again that night. I got on the main highway and stayed on it until I reached somewhere with an actual hotel. I parked where I could see the car from the room window. I took the Atlas inside with me. I locked the door, then checked it twice, then shoved the chair under the knob even though it opened outward and the chair would have done absolutely nothing. Sleep wasn't really an option. Every time headlights crossed the curtains, I was sitting up before I was fully awake. The room smelled like old carpet cleaner and that powdery air conditioner smell. Around dawn, I finally drifted off for maybe 40 minutes, and when I got up, my whole body felt like I'd spent the night bracing for impact. People ask why I didn't just call emergency services right there when it happened. I get that. I really do. But out there, with no signal and no traffic and a stranger close enough to touch my car with his, you stop thinking in big, useful plans. You think in very stupid, very immediate pieces. Stay on the road, don't roll the car, find another road, keep moving. The thing that unsettles me most isn't even the object across his lap, or the way he drifted me toward the edge. It's that I drove for over an hour without seeing a single vehicle, and he didn't show up until I was on the one stretch where there was nothing around me at all. Not even the possibility of another set of headlights in the distance. I still keep the Atlas in the car. It's on the passenger seat every time I travel, but now, if I notice another vehicle behind me on an empty back road, I don't wait to see what it wants. And I still can't stop wondering why he waited until I was on the most isolated stretch before pulling alongside me, like he'd been saving that part for the place where no one would have seen it. Story 2. The next one happened in a place that should have felt safer just because other people were around. I was already talking when the guy waved at me. I had my phone tucked between my ear and shoulder because the wind kept trying to catch the pump receipt and slap it against my leg, and I was telling my brother, no, I know it's late. I just wanted to stop now so I don't have to do it when I'm half asleep later. When I saw someone across the pump island lift a hand like he knew me. Not a polite gas station nod. Not that thing where you accidentally make eye contact and acknowledge another human being. I mean a familiar wave, like we'd met before and he was waiting for me to recognize him. I did what I always do when I don't know how to respond to a stranger. I smiled just enough to not make it weird and then immediately looked away like I was busy. My brother heard the change in my voice and went, "What?" I said, "Nothing. Some guy thinks he knows me." He was quiet for a second, then said, "Stay on the phone." That part was routine. I called him at every stop. I'm not one of those people who's comfortable being alone in the middle of nowhere and turns it into some empowering thing. I wish I was, I'm not. If I have to travel by myself, I do all the little things. Share location, text when I leave, text when I arrive, call at stops, keep the keys in my hand, pretend I'm chill when I absolutely am not. This trip wasn't even for anything fun. It was necessity. Family thing on one end, work schedule on the other, and I was making the drive because there wasn't really a better option. It was just after midnight, somewhere off the interstate in western Kansas, the kind of exit that has a gas station, a fast food place that's already closed, and a rest stop sign pointing farther down the road. Flat land, big sky, every light too bright because there's nothing else around it. The gas station itself wasn't deserted exactly. There were a couple of parked trucks off to one side and an SUV near the air machine. But it was that fake kind of not empty where technically people are present and somehow that doesn't help. I always called my brother at stops because he's older than me by enough that he still slips into that half-annoyed, half-parent mode. He acts like it's stupid and then answers on the first ring every time. So I had him on speaker while I pumped gas. He was asking if I'd eaten anything besides whatever gas station snack I was definitely about to buy. And I was rolling my eyes even though he couldn't see me. And the whole thing felt normal enough that I almost ignored the wave completely. Almost. The man across from me was maybe in his late 30s or 40s. Ball cap, dark jacket, jeans, average build, face forgettable in the way some faces are. If you'd asked me later to describe him in detail, I couldn't have done it. That's part of what makes him hard to shake. Nothing about him looked dramatic or alarming. He looked like half the men you see at any roadside place after dark. He kept glancing over, though, not enough to make a scene. Just enough that once I noticed it, I couldn't not notice it. I told myself he had me mixed up with someone else. That was reasonable. I had a hoodie on, hair up, tired face, probably looked like 100 other girls passing through. My brother said, "You still there?" I realized I'd gone quiet and said, "Yeah, I'm just going inside after this." "Take me with you." "I wasn't going to leave you outside." He laughed. I laughed too. It helped. The pump clicked off. I screwed the cap back on, got back in my car long enough to lock the doors while I sorted my wallet, then headed inside with my phone in my hand. The first partial release happened right there because I got under the lights by the entrance and thought, okay, if he's weird, he's not going to do anything in front of the cashier. Then I saw him inside. He was standing near one of those spinning racks with windshield wipes and phone chargers, turned slightly away like he was reading packaging. But he wasn't really looking at anything. You know when somebody's pretending to browse and their body doesn't match it. His shoulders were angled toward the door. He watched me in the reflection of the cooler glass. My pace changed without me meaning it to. Not faster exactly, tighter. More deliberate. My brother asked, "Is he in there?" I said yes too casually, which made him immediately take me more seriously. The store smelled like hot roller food and floor cleaner. There was a little TV in the corner with a weather radar on mute. The cashier was a woman around my mom's age wearing a store fleece and reading something on her phone until I came up. There was another customer at the coffee station, back turned, stirring creamer into a giant cup like he had nowhere to be until morning. Normal people, fluorescent lights, security camera dome over the register. I actually relaxed a little. I grabbed a bottle of water I didn't need, mostly because I didn't want to walk in, look nervous, and walk straight back out. The guy near the entrance drifted one aisle over without buying anything. I told myself maybe I was turning one awkward interaction into a whole movie in my head. I do that sometimes. A lot, if I'm being honest. Once I get embarrassed about maybe overreacting, I'll double down on being normal way longer than I should. I paid. The cashier smiled the way cashiers do when they're exhausted and still trying. I almost said, "Hey, this might sound weird, but is that guy waiting for me?" I almost did. I didn't. That's the part I replay. I walked back outside, my brother still talking because he had picked up on the fact that I was doing that thing where I go very quiet when I'm uncomfortable. He started telling me some story about one of his co-workers, and I knew he was doing it on purpose to keep my attention steady. I stepped out under the lights. and there was another person near my car. I hadn't seen him before. Younger than the first guy, maybe, hood up, leaning against the back quarter panel of my car like it was nothing. Not sitting on it, not touching it in an obviously confrontational way, just occupying the space beside it like he belonged there. When I got closer, he pushed off and took 2 easy steps away. No apology, no explanation. He just moved. I stopped without meaning to. My brother immediately went, "What now?" "There's another guy by my car." "What do you mean by your car?" "I mean by my actual car." He said my name in that sharp tone that means stop trying to be polite and listen to me. "Get back inside." So I did. That was the second partial release. The door shut behind me and I got this stupid rush of relief from hearing the little bell over the entrance ring. As if a bell meant safety. I pretended I'd forgotten something and wandered toward the chips while trying not to stare out the window too obviously. The first man came out of the aisle and walked toward the coolers. The second one lingered outside near the pump island. They didn't look at each other, that somehow made it worse. If they'd acted like friends, I would have had a simple explanation. Sketchy guys together, fine. But they were doing this loose practice thing where one existed in the same space as me while the other didn't quite. One was always in sight. One was somewhere I had to think about. My brother said, "Tell the cashier." I said, "And say what?" "Say 2 men are bothering you. But they haven't done anything." "That is them doing something." I hate that he was right. I drifted back toward the register. The cashier asked if I forgot a receipt. I said, "Can I just stand here for a second? There are these 2 guys outside and I think maybe they're waiting around my car." Her face changed, but not into alarm, more like tired recognition. She leaned just enough to look past me through the glass. Then she said, "You want me to watch while you go out?" Which was kind, also not especially helpful. I said yes. So I went back outside again with her vaguely watching through the window, which sounds reassuring until you're the person outside and realize vague watching from 15 feet away is not intervention. The younger guy was farther off now, near a trash can. The older one was by the ice chest. Neither was actively near me. My car sat there under the overhead lights like maybe I had imagined all of it. I unlocked it fast, got in, locked it again. My brother was still on the phone. That mattered more than I understood yet. I put my water in the cup holder, set the receipt in the passenger seat, and finally let myself breathe a little. The doors were locked, engine off, keys in hand. If I needed to leave, I could. I even laughed once just from the release of sitting inside the car again. I told him, "I think I'm being dramatic." Then I looked up. The older guy was in front of my car, off to the left where I could see him through the windshield. The younger one was behind me, near the curb line. Neither was close enough to justify panic. Neither was far enough to ignore. And that was when I realized they had arranged themselves so one of them was always visible while the other wasn't fully in view at the same time. If I looked at the man in front, I had to guess what the one behind was doing. If I checked the mirrors for the one behind, I lost sight of the one in front. Something in me went cold then. Not dramatic fear. More like all the extra thoughts dropped away and my body started prioritizing. My brother heard it in my breathing. "Start the car." I did. The engine turning over seemed to trigger them. The older man smiled and walked toward my driver's side window. Easy pace, not rushed, like he just wanted directions. At the exact same time, in my rear view, I saw the younger one grab a shopping cart from beside the trash can and angle it behind my car. Not slamming it there, just placing it in the exit lane at a slant where backing out would have meant hitting it or stopping to move it. It was so coordinated that for half a second my brain rejected it. People aren't supposed to move like that unless they've already decided something together. The older guy tapped lightly on the glass. Just a polite little knock. He was smiling. My whole face went hot, hands freezing, which is a terrible combination if you're trying to do anything requiring coordination. I kept the car in park because I didn't want to lurch. My brother was saying my name over and over. I put him on speaker and held the phone up, suddenly not caring whether the guy outside heard. I said loudly, way louder than necessary. "Yeah, I'm at the gas station right off the interstate by the truck parking, and the police are already on their way, right?" The man's smile changed. It didn't disappear, it just got smaller. I kept going before he could speak. "Okay, good, because there are two men here. One in a dark jacket by my window and one behind my car with a shopping cart blocking me in." "Yeah, I can see the store entrance. Yeah, the truck parking is right there." I wasn't just talking to my brother anymore. I was talking to every person within 50 feet who might bother to notice. For a second, nobody did. That was the exposed part of it that still gets me. There were people there, a cashier, a customer inside, truck drivers somewhere nearby, an SUV at the edge of the lot, bright lights, security cameras probably. And still it felt like I was sealed in this little bubble where the normal rules about being in public weren't doing anything for me. Then one of the parked trucks started moving. It had been idling farther off. Maybe the driver had been on a break or sleeping, I don't know. But the headlights came on and the truck rolled forward, slow at first, then enough that its cab angled into the lane beside us. The driver leaned on the horn once, not long, just a hard blast of sound that made everybody flinch. The younger guy yanked the cart back like he'd only been messing around. The older guy stepped away from my window. That was all I needed. I threw the car into reverse, then forward, then adjusted because my foot was slipping on the pedal from sweat. I got around the cart, around the pump island, and out toward the exit so fast I almost missed the turn back to the interstate. My brother was still talking, asking if I was driving, if the doors were locked, if they were following me. I checked the mirror so many times my neck hurt. No one followed, not then. I didn't calm down once I got back on the highway. I got worse. That's the thing about getting out of a situation like that. While it's happening, your brain has a job. Once you're moving away and nothing is actively touching the edges of your life, the delayed part hits. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the wheel at the bottom to steady them. My mouth was dry and I kept swallowing and getting nothing. My brother stayed on speaker until the next state line because he didn't trust me not to pull over somewhere stupid, and honestly, I didn't trust myself either. We replayed it while I drove. At first, I kept trying to make it smaller. Maybe they were messing with me. Maybe the cart thing was a coincidence. Maybe the first guy really did think he knew me. But every time I said one of those things out loud, I heard how weak it sounded. Coincidences don't position one man at the window and one at the rear the second your engine starts. Coincidences don't lean on your car and then drift away exactly when you approach. Coincidences don't make you feel observed from two directions at once. I stopped again only when I reached a larger travel plaza with a lot more people and bright signs and actual movement. Before I got out, I called him again, even though we'd only been off the phone for a minute. He picked up on the first ring and said, "Still there?" I said yes, and he stayed with me while I used the bathroom and bought terrible coffee and stood near a family with 3 loud kids because hearing children argue about chips felt like medicine. I did report it eventually, not because I thought anything would happen, more because I wanted a record somewhere outside my own head. The person I spoke to asked for descriptions, and I gave them what I had, which felt thin. Man in dark jacket, younger one in a hoodie, Western Kansas gas station off the interstate around midnight, shopping cart, knock on the window, smile. I think about the truck driver a lot, not in some heroic movie way. He didn't leap out and save me. He just noticed enough, moved his rig, used the horn, and changed the shape of the space so I had a way out. That's all. But sometimes that's the whole difference. Somebody making the situation inconvenient for the wrong people for 1 second at the right time. And I think about my brother hearing all of it live. If I'd told him I was fine and hung up after pumping gas like I was originally going to, the rest of it would have unfolded in silence. No witness. No reason for me to start speaking loudly. No easy way to make it sound like somebody else knew exactly where I was. I keep tracing it back to that tiny choice, leaving the call going while I got back in the car instead of saying goodnight. Because if I had hung up even for a moment, I don't know if they would have smiled the same way once they were sure no one else was listening. Story 3. The last one is the one that unsettles me the most because by the time I understood what kind of situation I was in, I was already inside it. I woke up to someone walking down the hallway, not pacing, not stumbling. Slow, deliberate steps on wood one after the other, with a slight pause between them like whoever it was knew the house well enough not to bump into anything in the dark. I was fully awake before I opened my eyes just from the sound. Travel does that to me. Hotel rooms, rentals, guest spaces, I surface fast if something changes. Years of work on the road, years of sleeping in unfamiliar places, and your brain gets good at cataloging what's normal for a room and what isn't. This wasn't normal. The bedroom was dark except for a weak strip of porch light leaking around the curtains. I didn't move at first. I just listened. My phone was charging on the nightstand to my right. My shoes were by the dresser. My small lockbox was under the desk across from the foot of the bed, exactly where I'd slid it before turning in, same as I always do. Passport, work documents, backup cards, a little bit of cash. Routine. The footsteps came closer. There was a hallway outside the bedroom door. Narrow, hardwood, no runner rug. I'd noticed that earlier because the place echoed in a slightly hollow way, like the floors had been refinished recently and the walls were still mostly bare. Whoever was out there took maybe 3 more steps, then stopped directly outside my room. I remember becoming intensely aware of my own body in very stupid detail. The blanket was twisted around one ankle. My mouth tasted stale from sleep. One hand had gone numb because I'd been lying on it. The room wasn't cold, but the back of my neck felt cold. Then I saw the shadow under the door. It shifted once, just enough to block the thin line of light from the hall, and stayed there. That's where the story starts. But to explain why it felt so wrong by then, I have to go back to when I got there, because the worst part wasn't that there was someone outside the bedroom. The worst part was how carefully ordinary the evening had been before it stopped being that. I travel alone for work a lot, enough that I don't romanticize it and enough that I don't feel helpless doing it either. Most of it is repetitive. Flight, car, rental, invoice, receipt, room, next site. I prefer predictable systems. I carry duplicates of chargers. I keep a folder for printed confirmations. I use the same soft-sided overnight bag for most trips because it fits under any airline seat and still somehow holds more than it should. And I always travel with that small lockbox because once you've had one important document go missing on a work trip, you stop trusting nightstands and desk drawers. This trip had me outside Flagstaff for a meeting the next morning, and instead of a hotel, I booked a cabin rental on the outskirts of town because the options closer in were either full or absurdly priced. The listing looked normal. Clean kitchen, 2 bedrooms, quiet neighborhood, self-check-in, all the usual language. The host had good reviews. Nothing about it suggested anything unusual. I got there in the early evening right around dusk. Pine trees around the lot, gravel drive. Neighboring houses present but not close enough to feel social. Not isolated in a dramatic mountain way, just separated enough that you couldn't count on anyone hearing you if you raised your voice indoors. The front porch light was already on. The lockbox with the house key was where the message said it'd be. Entry code worked. Inside, the place smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old wood. Not unpleasant, lived in a staged way. Throw blanket folded over the couch, 2 mugs on an open shelf, tourist brochures on the counter. I set my bag down, did the usual quick scan of locks and windows, and put my document lockbox under the desk in the bedroom I'd chosen. Routine again, everything in its place. Then I noticed the note. It was on the kitchen counter, propped against the coffee maker. Welcome, first name, glad you made it, hope the drive-in wasn't too bad. Standard enough. Hosts do that. But there was one line under it that made me pause. It said something like, got in just before sunset, perfect timing. The deer usually cross the road around then. It caught me because it matched my arrival more closely than a generic greeting should have. I had arrived just before sunset, not an hour before, not this evening. Just before. For a second I wondered if maybe a neighbor had seen me pull in and texted the host. Or maybe the host lived nearby. Or maybe it was one of those lines they wrote for everyone because most people check in around that time. There are always reasonable explanations at the start if you want them badly enough. I remember actually smiling at it and thinking, well, that's either friendly or a little too attentive. I put the note aside, unpacked minimally, and called my wife to let her know I'd made it. We have the same conversation every time I travel. Yes, I got there. Yes, I ate. Yes, I remembered to bring the folder. No, I don't need you to remind me about the morning alarm. She jokes that I turn into a field robot when I'm on work trips. She's not wrong. I like systems because systems make unfamiliar places feel temporary and manageable. That call happened in the kitchen while I was rinsing out the travel mug I'd used on the drive. I remember the faucet sputtering for a second before it ran clear. I remember the window over the sink reflecting the room back at me, because outside had already gone mostly dark. I remember thinking the house was quieter than I expected, like the walls were dense. After the call, I heated up something simple for dinner, answered 2 work emails, and laid out what I needed for the next morning. Shirt on the back of a chair, keys on the entry table, wallet by the lamp, lockbox under the desk. I moved through the place in that absent, practiced way you do when you're tired and trying not to think about anything beyond the next task. The first genuinely wrong thing happened with my water bottle. I know how minor that sounds, but that's how these things work. I had filled it in the kitchen and left it on the coffee table while I checked something in my bag. A few minutes later, I went to sit down on the couch and it was on the end table by the window instead. Not far. Not dramatically relocated, just not where I'd left it. I stood there looking at it longer than the situation deserved. Then I told myself I'd moved it without noticing. Travel fatigue does that. You're thinking about tomorrow, about the route, about your notes, and your body keeps doing little tasks without logging them properly. Reasonable explanation. Annoying, but reasonable. Then it happened again with my keys. I'd set them on the entry table very deliberately because I hate misplacing keys in unfamiliar houses. Later, when I went to make sure the front door was locked, they were on the kitchen counter beside the folded welcome note. I was alone. I had not put them there. I knew that with the sort of calm certainty that doesn't help at all. Still, I tried to make it fit. Maybe I had picked them up while on the phone. Maybe I had absent-mindedly set them down there while rinsing the mug. I even retraced my steps like that would produce an answer. Kitchen, living room, front door, bedroom. Same soft overhead lighting. Same faint wood polish smell. Same quiet cabin. By then I wasn't scared. I was irritated with myself. That changed when I found the second note. It was later, closer to bedtime. I had changed into a t-shirt and was in the bedroom going over the meeting schedule on my laptop one last time. I took a call from a coworker, brief and private, just clarifying a change to the morning agenda. I wasn't on speaker. The bedroom door was mostly closed. The house was quiet. We talked maybe 6 minutes. Nothing dramatic, just logistics. When I ended the call, I left the room to brush my teeth. I was gone maybe 3 minutes. When I came back, there was a note on the bedside table. Not there before. Definitely not. It was a torn piece of paper, folded once. My name on the outside in blocky handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside, one sentence: early start tomorrow. Hope they don't move the meeting again. I sat down on the edge of the bed so slowly it felt like watching someone else do it. My skin had gone tight all over my arms. I could hear the blood in my ears, which is a sound I usually only notice after running. The room suddenly seemed full of little details I'd ignored. The vent hum, the soft tick from the cheap wall clock in the hallway, the way the door to the second bedroom stood open a crack showing darkness inside. I read the note 3 times. Then I walked the house. Front door locked, back door locked, windows latched, bathroom empty, closet empty, second bedroom empty, shower curtain pulled back, kitchen, living room, entry, all clear. I even checked under the beds, which I am not proud of, but there I was, a middle-aged professional on a work trip crouching to inspect dust shadows because a piece of paper had broken whatever ordinary spell the evening started with. Nothing. No sign of forced entry, no sign of anyone. I picked up my phone and almost called the host right then, but I stopped, because what was I going to say? Someone moved my keys and left a note inside a locked house. Even as I thought it, it sounded unstable. Maybe there was some camera or speaker setup I hadn't noticed. Maybe the host had entered earlier with a management key and left the second note before I ever checked the room closely. Maybe the meeting comment was a lucky guess based on hearing me talk. Every explanation felt bad. I kept choosing the least bad one. Still, I checked every lock again, this time more methodically. Window latches, back handle, front deadbolt. I even dragged a dining chair under the front knob, which was silly but made me feel fractionally less exposed. I took the lockbox from under the desk and put it on top of it, as if having my important documents within reach mattered to anything. Then I went into the bedroom and locked that door too. I should mention something about the bedroom door. It had an interior lock, the simple push-button kind on the knob, and the frame looked old. Not flimsy exactly, but not something I'd have trusted against a determined person. I noticed that then for the first time. I noticed the gap under it too, enough to show light, enough to show movement. I turned off the lamp and lay down fully dressed except for my shoes, which I kept on the floor within reach. I told myself I was overreacting, that I'd laugh about it in the morning, that the notes were some misguided host attempt at charm. A creepy attempt, but still human and stupid rather than dangerous. I didn't sleep. That's when the opening moment happened. Sometime deep in the night, no idea exactly when because I didn't look at the phone yet, the footsteps started in the hall and came to my door. I stayed still long enough that my shoulder began to ache. The shadow under the door shifted once more. I could tell the person outside had stopped exactly at the center of the door, not off to one side, not moving around, just standing there. I reached for the phone. Even that felt loud. Fabric rustling. Charger sliding across the wood of the nightstand. My hand wasn't shaking yet, but it had that detached, clumsy feeling like it belonged to someone wearing gloves. I unlocked the screen. No service bar issue, which was almost funny after the second story, but I was on weak wireless and didn't trust a call not to ring audibly or fail at the wrong second. I opened my messages first, then stopped because texting what? To who? Someone is at the bedroom door in my rental cabin. Then the shadow moved lower. Not crouching exactly. More like the person outside shifted their weight and leaned, so the outline stretched and changed. I watched it without blinking. That's what I remember most clearly. My eyes hurt because I would not look away from the gap. The shadow stopped at the exact place where I'd been standing earlier when I changed clothes. I know how strange that sentence sounds, but I don't know how else to say it. I had changed near the dresser 3 or 4 feet back from the door, and something about where the shadow paused gave me the sick impression that whoever was outside knew that. Not just that I was in the room, where I had been in the room. Then I heard my name, whispered through the door in a voice I didn't recognize, not loud, not playful, not angry, just low and certain, like they were testing whether I would answer if they made it personal. I didn't. My body finally caught up to the situation before my thoughts did. My throat went dry. My hands started tingling. I moved off the bed without standing fully and back toward the desk because it felt wrong to stay where I was visible from the bottom of the door. I grabbed the chair and wedged it under the knob, even though I knew the geometry of it wasn't ideal. Then I picked up the lockbox, absurdly, as if protecting documents mattered more than protecting myself. It was just the nearest heavy thing. The whisper didn't come again. Instead, I heard a soft drag along the outside of the door. Not scratching, not a fingernail horror movie sound, more like fabric or a sleeve brushing the wood as the person shifted position. Then a tiny tap near the frame, once, like somebody checking whether I'd engage. I stayed silent. Minutes passed, or seconds. It's impossible to be accurate about time in that state. At some point, I texted my wife something useless like, "Call me as soon as you see this. Someone may be in the house." Then I sent the address to a coworker because he was local enough to understand where I was. Then I opened the keypad to call emergency services and held my thumb over it without pressing because I was listening so hard I couldn't make myself introduce any other sound into the room. From outside the bedroom, I heard movement again. One slow step away, then another. Then from farther down the hall, the sound of the second bedroom door moving. Soft, careful, familiar. That part got under my skin worse than the whisper. Somebody wasn't rushing. They weren't trying the knob or pounding or demanding money or acting like a burglar interrupted. They were moving through the house as if it was theirs to move through. The next few hours were a standoff, though it didn't feel dramatic while it was happening. It felt long and humiliating and exhausting. I stayed on the floor by the bed with the phone brightness all the way down. I texted. I finally made the emergency call in a whisper from inside the bathroom attached to the bedroom with the fan off so I could still hear the hall. I explained as clearly as I could. Rental cabin, alone. Unknown person inside or just outside the bedroom. Notes left in the house, door locked. They took it seriously, but not in the instant rescue way people imagine. Location confirmation. Stay where you are. Do not confront. Units are coming. Coming takes time. During that wait, I heard more than I wanted to. Cabinet door in the kitchen. A low thump from the living room. The unmistakable squeak of weight settling onto the couch cushions, then releasing. Once what sounded like the back door opening and closing. Once footsteps crossing the porch outside the bedroom window. None of it constant, none of it loud. Just enough to keep proving that the house I had checked and locked had stopped being mine in any meaningful sense. I did not open the bedroom door, no matter what I heard. At one point, maybe an hour before dawn, there was a soft knock, not on the bedroom door, on the bathroom wall which backed to the hallway. 3 taps. Slow, patient. I remember pressing my thumb so hard into the corner of my phone that it left a mark. By the time the sky started to gray at the edges of the curtains, I had stopped expecting any single moment of attack and started fearing something almost worse. That daylight would come and reveal how close someone had been the whole time. When I finally heard vehicles outside, real ones, doors closing hard, voices calling out, I almost didn't trust that either. I answered only when they identified themselves twice and I could hear more than one person. When I opened the bedroom door, the house was empty. No broken locks, no open windows, no person waiting at the end of the hall. Nothing appeared disturbed except the notes. The first one was still on the kitchen counter. The second was still on the bedside table. A third thing had appeared, though I didn't realize it until later. My keys, which I had placed on the bedroom desk after locking myself in, were on the entry table again by the front door. That detail still makes my scalp tighten when I think about it. The officers went through the cabin outside and in, porch, yard, windows, crawl space access, nothing obvious. The host was contacted. He sounded shocked, then defensive, then overly helpful in a way that didn't help. Codes had supposedly not been shared. No one else was supposed to have access. There were explanations offered, none complete. Maybe prior guest left something odd behind. Maybe cleaning staff moved items and forgot. Maybe stress made the rest feel bigger. But stress doesn't write notes in response to private conversations. Stress doesn't relocate keys from inside a locked bedroom to the table by the front door. I did not stay for the meeting. I sat in my car with the doors locked, morning light on the windshield. That stale pine air from the dashboard vents, and I called work and told them they'd have to figure it out without me. Then I drove into town and checked into the most boring chain hotel I could find. Keycard. Lobby coffee, people in logo polos, exactly what I wanted. I put the lockbox in the room safe and still kept checking on it like it was the only stable object left. I travel less now if I can avoid it. When I do, I choose hotels over rentals. I still carry the lockbox. I still check the room the second I enter. I still put my keys in the same place every time, partly because routine helps and partly because I need to know if they're not there. What I can't get past is not the whisper, even though hearing my own name through a closed bedroom door is something I don't think I'll ever be fully casual about again. It's the phone call. It happened after I had already checked every lock and shut myself inside for the night. The bedroom door was nearly closed. I wasn't on speaker. No television was on. No window was open. So I still don't know who was in that house with me, or where they were standing while I talked, or how they knew details of a private call that should have belonged only to me and the person on the other end of it.